The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across 200 frozen faces as I stepped through the ballroom doors of the Grand View Hotel in Denver. My simple black dress felt like armor against the sea of pastel gowns and morning suits. The string quartet's melody died mid-note when my father Robert saw me. His champagne flute slipped from his fingers, exploding against the marble floor in a shower of glass and golden liquid. His face drained of color until he looked like a corpse in an expensive tuxedo. "Oh, why are you still alive?" The words tore from his throat, raw and horrified. My sister Madison's bouquet of white roses tumbled to the ground. My mother Grace gripped the edge of her table knuckles, white as bone. In that perfect silence, I smiled. "Hello, Dad. Surprised to see me? You should be. After all, you're the one who tried to make sure I'd never walk through any door again." 3 years before that wedding, I thought I understood my place in the world. At 25, I worked as a pediatric nurse at Children's Hospital Colorado, spending my days caring for sick children and going home to my cozy apartment in Capitol Hill. My life felt complete, especially after Marcus entered it. Marcus Williams was everything I dreamed of finding in a partner. A resident doctor specializing in pediatric surgery, he had gentle hands that could stitch up the tiniest wounds and a smile that made even the sickest children laugh. We'd met over a patient's bedside, a little girl named Sophia who needed surgery for a congenital heart defect. While I prepared her for the procedure, Marcus knelt down to her level and pulled out a tiny teddy bear wearing surgical scrubs. "This is Dr. Bear," he told her solemnly. "He's going to watch over you while you sleep, okay?" That moment, watching this tall, handsome man with skin the color of rich coffee make a frightened child smile, my heart shifted in my chest. 6 months later, we were inseparable. Marcus understood my dedication to my work because he shared it. We'd grab coffee between shifts, discussing cases and dreaming about the future. He wanted to open a free clinic for underserved children. I wanted to develop better pain management protocols for pediatric patients. Together, we felt like we could change the world one small patient at a time. My family, meanwhile, occupied their usual prestigious positions in Denver society. My father, Robert, presided over the district court, his reputation for tough sentencing making him a favorite among conservative voters. People called him Maximum Robert for the way he handed down the harshest possible punishments, especially to young Black and Latino defendants. I tried not to think about that too much, told myself he was just upholding the law. My mother Grace ran the Whitfield Foundation, a charity supporting disadvantaged youth. She organized elaborate galas where wealthy donors sipped champagne and wrote checks feeling good about themselves. Grace had perfected the art of looking compassionate while maintaining careful distance from the actual recipients of her charity. Her blonde hair never had a strand out of place. Her designer suits never showed a wrinkle. Madison, 3 years younger than me, was finishing her law degree at University of Denver. She'd inherited our father's sharp mind and our mother's calculating nature. Where I'd chosen healing, she'd chosen power. She studied constantly, determined to graduate at the top of her class and follow Robert into the legal world. On paper, we were the perfect family, the stern but fair judge, the philanthropist, the future lawyer, and the caring nurse. We gathered for Sunday dinners at my parents' estate in Cherry Hills, where conversation flowed as smoothly as the wine and everyone played their assigned roles. That March evening started like any other family dinner. The dining room table gleamed with polished silver and crystal glasses. Grace had prepared her signature roast chicken with rosemary potatoes. Madison discussed her latest mock trial victory, while Robert nodded approvingly. I waited until dessert to share my news. My hand trembled slightly as I set down my fork. "I have something to tell you all," I began, unable to suppress my smile. "I'm pregnant." The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked through 3 eternal seconds of silence. Grace recovered first, though her smile looked painted on. "Oh, Alysa, how Unexpected. I didn't realize you were seeing someone seriously enough for children. Oh, Marcus and I have been together for 6 months, I said. We're very happy. He's already talking about converting his spare room into a nursery. I'd imagined many reactions, but nothing prepared me for the transformation that came over my father's face. His jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscles jumping beneath his skin. His gray eyes, usually cold and controlled, blazed with something that looked like rage. Marcus, he repeated, his voice deadly quiet. The black doctor from your hospital. His name is Dr. Marcus Williams, I said, lifting my chin. He's brilliant and kind, and he's gonna be a wonderful father. Robert's fist slammed onto the table, making the crystals sing. You will not have that baby. Robert, Grace gasped, though I noticed she didn't disagree. I'm 25 years old, I said, my voice steadier than my hands. This is my decision. You're my daughter, Robert snarled. You will not pollute our bloodline with some... Choose your next words very carefully, Dad, I interrupted, standing up, because once you say them, you can never take them back. Madison watched our confrontation like it was one of her law school case studies, her blue eyes calculating. She didn't defend me. She didn't say anything at all. You'll take care of this problem, Robert said, his judge voice in full effect. Quietly and quickly. I know a discreet clinic. No one needs to know about your mistake. My baby is not a mistake. I grabbed my purse, my whole body shaking with fury and disbelief. And if you can't accept your grandchild, then maybe you don't deserve to be in their life. I left that night thinking we just needed time. Surely my family would come around once the shock wore off. They loved me. They'd love my baby. 2 hours after I got home, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My blood turned to ice as I opened the attached photos. Me walking into my apartment building. Me at the grocery store that afternoon. Me through the window of the hospital break room. A dozen pictures all taken without my knowledge. The message read, "You're being watched. Make the right choice." My hands shook as I tried calling the number back. Disconnected. I checked my doors and windows, double-locking everything. Sleep didn't come that night. Every car passing on the street below, every footstep in the hallway made my heart race. The next morning, another text arrived. This time, the photo showed Marcus entering his apartment. The message was simpler. He's being watched too. I wanted to go to the police, but what would I say, that someone was taking pictures of me? It wasn't technically illegal, and who would believe that Judge Robert Whitfield, pillar of the community, might be behind it? The photographs kept coming over the next 2 weeks. Me at work with patients, Marcus in surgery, the two of us having lunch in the hospital cafeteria. Each image felt like a violation, a reminder that nowhere was safe. I stopped sleeping, lost weight. Marcus noticed my anxiety, but I couldn't tell him the truth. How could I explain that my own family might be stalking us? He'd think I was paranoid, hormonal, imagining things. Then came the morning that changed everything. April 10th, a beautiful spring day with the Rockies gleaming in the distance. I'd worked a night shift and was driving home on Interstate 70, exhausted, but looking forward to my day off. Marcus and I had plans to look at baby furniture. The truck came out of nowhere, swerving into my lane. I jerked the wheel hard to avoid it, pumping my brakes. Nothing happened. My foot went all the way to the floor, the pedal useless beneath it. Time slowed to individual heartbeats as my car careened toward the guardrail at 60 miles per hour. The last thing I remember before impact was thinking about the baby. My hands flew to my stomach, a futile gesture of protection, as my Honda Civic smashed through the guardrail. The car rolled twice down the embankment before slamming into a snowbank left from a late spring storm. The airbag exploded in my face, white powder filling my lungs. Consciousness came and went like waves. Sirens, voices shouting, the hydraulic scream of the jaws of life peeling my car apart like a tin can. Someone kept saying my name, telling me to stay awake, but my eyelids felt weighted with lead. I woke up in Denver General Machines, beeping around me like electronic birds. The fluorescent light stabbed into my brain. When I tried to move, pain shot through my ribs and left shoulder. But worse than any physical pain was the emptiness I felt in my belly, the absence of the tiny flutter I'd just begun to notice. The baby. I whispered to the nurse checking my IV. Her face told me everything before she spoke. "I'm so sorry, honey. The trauma was too severe. There was nothing we could do." I turned my face to the pillow and sobbed until my broken ribs screamed in protest. My child, who I'd only known for 6 weeks, was gone. The future I'd imagined, the tiny fingers and toes, the first smile, the bedtime stories. All of it erased by twisted metal and failed brakes. Marcus arrived within minutes of my waking. His surgical scrubs rumpled his beautiful brown eyes red-rimmed. He held me while I cried, whispering meaningless comfort against my hair. Neither of us had words for a loss this profound. My family arrived an hour later, a united front of concerned faces and expensive flowers. Grace clutched a teddy bear of all things, as if I were still a child who could be comforted by stuffed animals. Madison hovered by the door like she might need to make a quick escape, and Robert studied my chart with the intensity of a judge reviewing evidence. Such a terrible accident," Grace murmured, not quite meeting my eyes. "That curve can be so dangerous in the morning sun. Thank God you survived." Something cold slithered through my chest. "How did you know it was morning? How did you know which curve?" Grace's perfectly composed mask slipped for just a second. "Well, the nurse told us, of course, when we called to check on you." But the nurse hadn't been in the room when they arrived, and I was certain no one had told them the details of where my accident occurred. The cold feeling spread ice crystals forming in my veins. "At least," Robert said, still examining my chart, "you won't have any permanent damage. You'll be able to return to your normal life once you heal." Normal life, as if anything could be normal after losing my baby, as if the life growing inside me had been nothing more than an inconvenience to be erased. They stayed for exactly 30 minutes, the appropriate amount of time for a hospital visit. Madison squeezed my uninjured hand, once her manicured nails digging in slightly. "Everything happens for a reason, Alysa," she said. "Sometimes fate knows best." After they left, I lay staring at the ceiling tiles, counting the tiny holes in each one. My mind kept circling back to Grace's slip. How had she known about the morning sun and the curve? Why was Robert so interested in my medical information? 2 days into my hospital stay, the toxicology report came back. Dr. Patel, a young resident with kind eyes, frowned as she reviewed the results. "This is unusual," she said. "We found traces of zolpidem in your system. It's a sedative commonly known as Ambien. Do you take sleep medication?" "Never," I said. "I've never had trouble sleeping until the threatening messages started. Until my father demanded I terminate my pregnancy. Until my entire world shifted on its axis." "The levels weren't high enough to cause the accident directly," Dr. Patel continued, "but combined with fatigue from your night shift, it could have impaired your reflexes, made it harder to react when your brakes failed." "My brakes? Has anyone examined my car?" She shook her head. "I believe it was towed to a salvage yard. The police ruled it a mechanical failure. These things happen with older vehicles." But my Honda was only 3 years old, meticulously maintained. I just had it serviced 2 weeks ago. Brakes didn't just fail, and sedatives didn't just appear in your bloodstream. That afternoon, while Marcus was in surgery, I had an unexpected visitor. Sheila and Damon, 2 nurses from the cardiac unit, stopped by with flowers. We made small talk about hospital gossip and difficult patients. Then, as they were leaving, Sheila paused at the door. "You know, the strangest thing happened the morning of your accident," she said quietly. "Your father called the cardiac unit looking for you, said it was a family emergency. When we told him you were working pediatric ICU that night, he asked what time your shift ended." My blood chilled. "What time did he call?" Around 5 in the morning. I remember because I thought it was odd a judge calling that early. 5 in the morning, 2 hours before my accident, before anyone should have known there would be an emergency. Damon shifted uncomfortably. He also asked which route you usually took home. Said he wanted to make sure you got his message. We didn't think anything of it at the time, but after what happened? They exchanged glances and hurried out, leaving me alone with the horrifying implications. My father had called about an emergency before there was one. He'd asked about my route home, and somehow I'd ended up with sedatives in my system and failed brakes on that exact route. The next day, I woke from a fitful doze to find Robert in my room, not visiting during normal hours with the rest of the family, but alone at 6 in the evening when the halls were quiet. He stood by the window, silhouetted against the setting sun. "The police have closed their investigation," he said without turning around. "Mechanical failure. No one to blame. These things happen." "Do they—" I kept my voice level despite the fear clawing at my throat. "Do brakes just fail on well-maintained cars? Do sedatives just appear in people's bloodstreams?" He turned then, and his face was a mask of cold control. "Grief makes people imagine things, Alysa. Look for someone to blame. But sometimes accidents are just accidents. Sometimes they're even blessings in disguise." Blessings. The word came out as a hiss. "My baby is dead." "The pregnancy was a mistake. Now you can move forward without complications. Return to your life, your career. Find someone more suitable." "Get out!" I pressed the call button for the nurse. "Get out of my room." He straightened his tie, unmoved by my anger. "I've paid your medical bills. Insurance can be so complicated after accidents. Consider it a gift." He paused at the door. "Oh, and Marcus has been offered a fellowship at Johns Hopkins. Quite prestigious. He'd be a fool to turn it down." The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a coffin lid. I knew then with absolute certainty that my father had tried to kill me. The brake failure, the sedatives, the convenient fellowship to remove Marcus, all of it orchestrated by the man who was supposed to protect me. He'd rather see me dead than have a mixed-race grandchild. But knowing and proving were two different things. Who would believe that the Honorable Judge Whitfield was capable of attempted murder? I had no evidence, just circumstances and coincidences that any good lawyer could explain away. That night, fighting through the fog of pain medication, I made a decision. If my father thought I was weak, he was wrong. If he thought I would forget what he'd done, he'd made a fatal error. I would find proof. I would get justice for my baby. The next morning, I asked Marcus about the fellowship. His face lit up, then immediately fell. "I'm not leaving you," he said firmly. "Not after everything that's happened." "Maybe you should consider it," I heard myself say, hating every word. "It's an amazing opportunity." I couldn't tell him the truth. Couldn't put him in danger. If Robert could orchestrate a car accident, what else was he capable of? The best way to protect Marcus was to let him go, even though it shattered what was left of my heart. While he tried to convince me we could make long-distance work, I noticed something odd. A tiny red light blinking in the air conditioning vent, so small I would have missed it if I hadn't been staring at the ceiling for days. I waited until I was alone to investigate. Standing on a chair, ignoring the screaming protest from my ribs, I peered into the vent. A small camera, no bigger than a button, was wedged between the slats. Someone had been watching me, recording my conversations, my grief, my suspicions. The violation felt like another kind of assault, stripping away even the privacy of my hospital room. I left the camera in place, but started being very careful about what I said aloud. When the nurse brought my discharge papers, I found a business card tucked between them. Derek Walsh, private investigator. On the back, someone had written, "Your father's watching. If you want the truth, call me." I met Derek Walsh at a rundown diner in Aurora, far from my father's courthouse and social circles. He looked exactly like what he was. A former cop gone private with nicotine-stained fingers and eyes that had seen too much. I slid into the cracked vinyl booth across from him, my body still aching from the accident. "You're either very brave or very stupid coming here," he said, lighting a cigarette despite the no smoking sign. "Robert Whitfield doesn't like loose ends." "Did he hire you to follow me?" Derek laughed, a harsh sound like grinding gears. "Among other things. Started 2 months ago. Surveillance," he said. "Keep tabs on his daughter, make sure she's making good choices." He pulled out a manila folder thick with photographs. But we both know it went beyond watching. I flipped through the pictures, hundreds of shots documenting my every move. Me at work at home with Marcus. The invasion of privacy made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to focus. "Tell me about the accident." His face darkened. "That wasn't supposed to happen. I do surveillance, not wet work. When Robert called that morning, told me to disable your car, I refused. Next thing I know, you're in the hospital and my payments doubled with a bonus for silence." "So you didn't—" "Lady, I may be scum, but I'm not a killer. Someone else handled that job. Someone with fewer scruples and more skill." He stubbed out his cigarette. "Your old man's got connections you don't want to know about. Cops, mechanics, doctors who'll look the other way." "Why are you telling me this?" Derek studied me for a long moment. "Maybe because I've got a daughter your age. Maybe because Robert's getting sloppy dangerous. Or maybe because you're going to need help with what you're planning." "What makes you think I'm planning anything?" "You've got that look. Same one I've seen on abuse victims who finally snap. You're going to fight back." He slid a digital recorder across the table. "This is our conversation from last week. Robert explaining exactly what he wanted done to your brake lines. Not admissible in court, but might be useful." I pocketed the recorder, my mind racing. "What else can you tell me?" "Your mother's charity. It's a front. Robert's been skimming from it for years, using the money for his dirty work. And that's just the tip. He's got judges in his pocket, cops on his payroll, and a whole network of people who'll do anything for the right price." "Including my sister." Derek's expression turned pitying. "Madison's been helping him since her second year of law school. She's the one who suggested the sedatives. Said you had a history of sleep problems, made it look medical." The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. My baby sister, who I'd helped with homework and taught to ride a bike, had drugged me. Had helped plan the accident that killed my child. "I need evidence," I said. "Real proof that would stand up in court." "Then you need to be smarter than them. And you need to disappear before they decide you're too much trouble to keep around." That conversation changed everything. I spent the next 2 weeks playing the grieving daughter, letting my family think their plan had worked. I cried at the right moments, accepted their comfort, even agreed when Robert suggested I take some time off work to heal. Meanwhile, I planned my own death. Catherine Reeves, Robert's assistant of 15 years, was the key. I'd always liked her, a widow raising a teenage son alone, working impossible hours for demanding bosses. She kept Robert's calendar, managed his files, knew where all the bodies were buried. Metaphorically speaking, though, I was beginning to wonder if there were literal bodies too. I approached her at the courthouse, timing it when Robert was in session. Her desk was cluttered with legal briefs and empty coffee cups, testament to another late night. "Catherine, I need your help," I said without preamble. She looked up, dark circles under her eyes. "Alysa, what are you doing here? Your father said you were recovering." "I know what he did. The accident, the baby, all of it. And I know you know too." Her face went pale. She glanced around the empty office, then grabbed my arm and pulled me into the supply closet. "You can't be here," she whispered frantically. "If he finds out, he's destroying people's lives. My baby is dead because of him. How many others, Catherine? How many families has he torn apart from that bench?" She started crying, then silent tears that spoke of years of complicity and guilt. "My son Danny got arrested 2 years ago. Possession of marijuana, barely enough for a joint. Robert said he'd make it disappear if I helped him. Just little things at first. Scheduling meetings off the books, misfiling certain documents. But it got worse. What kind of worse? Evidence tampering, witness intimidation. There's a whole system, Alysa. Cops who arrest the right people, prosecutors who throw cases, judges who ensure convictions. Your father doesn't just preside over injustice. He orchestrates it. My stomach churned. We have to stop him. With what he's careful, everything's deniable handled through intermediaries, and he's got leverage on everyone involved. She wiped her eyes. I've wanted out for years, but where would I go? Danny's still on probation. One word from Robert, and my son goes to prison. What if we could get evidence, real proof? Catherine laughed bitterly. He keeps the important files in a private safe in his home office. Combination changed monthly security system he designed himself. I've never even been in that room. But I had. Countless times as a child bringing him coffee while he worked. I knew about the safe hidden behind the portrait of his father. Knew the combination was always based on case numbers from his biggest convictions. If I could get in there... I have a plan, I said, but I need your help. And afterward, you and Danny need to disappear too. Start fresh somewhere safe. She searched my face for a long moment. What kind of plan? The kind where Alysa Whitfield dies in a hiking accident and someone else walks away with enough evidence to destroy him. It took 3 more secret meetings to work out the details. Catherine would create a paper trail showing I'd been depressed since the miscarriage, seeing a therapist who didn't exist. She'd plant searches on my work computer for hiking trails known for accidents. Meanwhile, I liquidated my savings, sold everything valuable, and created a new identity with documents Derek Walsh procured through his less legitimate contacts. Sarah Coleman, 28 years old, originally from Ohio, no family experienced private nurse looking for live-in positions. Simple background, hard to verify, easy to disappear. The night before my death, I broke into my parents' house. They were at another charity gala, Madison studying at the law library. I had 4 hours. Robert's office smelled like leather and expensive bourbon. The portrait of my grandfather gazed down with the same cold eyes as his son. I worked the combination. Numbers from the case that made Robert's reputation, where he'd sentenced a 19-year-old to life for a crime I now suspected he hadn't committed. The safe opened on the 3rd try. Inside were files that made my blood run cold, photographs of beaten witnesses who'd changed their testimony, bank records showing payments to jurors, medical reports altered to support prosecution narratives, and worse, a ledger detailing which defendants had been specifically targeted for arrest and conviction with payment amounts next to each name. My father wasn't just corrupt. He was running a conviction mill destroying lives for profit. I photographed everything, my hands shaking so badly I had to retake half the shots. At the bottom of the safe was another surprise. Contracts showing Grace's charity was laundering money, not just for Robert, but for a larger criminal organization. Human-trafficking, drug-running weapons sales. My mother's foundation for helping disadvantaged youth was actually helping to create more of them. The final document was a will recently updated. If anything happened to me, everything would go to Madison and various charities. Marcus wasn't mentioned. Our child wasn't acknowledged. We'd been erased as efficiently as if we'd never existed. I closed the safe, reset the combination, and slipped out into the night. But I'd made one mistake, assuming Madison was at the library. She was waiting by my car, looking like a fashion model in designer jeans and a cashmere sweater. "Hello, Alysa." Her voice was conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "Late night visit." "Madison, I can explain?" "No need. I know why you're here." She examined her manicured nails. "You always were too emotional, too idealistic. Did you really think you could bring down Dad? He owns this city. He killed my baby. He solved a problem. You should be grateful. Do you know what it would have done to his career? To all our careers? A mixed-race bastard grandchild." She shook her head. Sometimes sacrifices are necessary for the greater good. Whose greater good? The criminals he's protecting, the innocent people he's destroying. Madison's perfect composure cracked slightly. You don't understand how the world works. Power isn't about right or wrong. It's about who controls the narrative, and we control it all. The arrests, the trials, the convictions. We decide who rises and who falls. How long have you been part of this? Since I understood what real power looks like. Dad showed me the truth, that justice is just a performance, and we're the directors. She pulled out her phone. I should call him, tell him about your little visit. But you won't. She tilted her head. Why wouldn't I? Because you're smart enough to know this house of cards is starting to collapse. Derek Walsh has already turned. Catherine's ready to run. The FBI's sniffing around Dad's cases. When it all comes crashing down, do you want to be standing next to him? For the first time in years, I saw uncertainty in my sister's eyes. You're lying. Check his safe. Look at the dates on those contracts. He's getting sloppy, taking bigger risks. How long before someone he's wronged comes looking for revenge? How long before one of his victims decides prison is worth putting a bullet in his head? Madison stood frozen, calculating odds like the future lawyer she was. Get out, she finally said. Leave and never come back. As far as I'm concerned, you were never here. Madison, go before I change my mind, and Alysa. After tonight, you really are dead to this family. Don't forget that. I drove away knowing I'd never see my sister again. At least not as Alysa Whitfield. 3 days later, Sarah Coleman boarded a Greyhound bus to Portland, while search and rescue teams found Alysa Whitfield's abandoned car at a trailhead in Rocky Mountain National Park. Her backpack was discovered near a dangerous cliff, along with a suicide note confessing she couldn't live with the loss of her child. They searched for a body they'd never find. My family played their parts perfectly. The grieving parents, the devastated sister. Marcus was told the news gently professionally. He collapsed in the hospital break room and had to be sedated. I wanted to contact him to tell him the truth. But Robert's reach was long, and Marcus's grief was the only thing keeping him safe. As long as everyone believed I was dead, they'd leave him alone. Sarah Coleman settled into a furnished room in southeast Portland and began building a new life, but she never forgot why Alysa Whitfield had to die. The real work was just beginning. Portland rain had a different quality than Denver snow. It seeped into everything, creating a perpetual dampness that matched my mood. As Sarah Coleman, I rented a small apartment above a Vietnamese restaurant, the smell of pho a constant reminder that I was far from home. My nursing credentials, carefully altered by Derek's contacts, got me work with a private home care agency. My first patient was an elderly man named George who'd suffered a stroke. His daughter hired me to help with daily care while she worked. George couldn't speak anymore, but his eyes were intelligent, watching everything. In the quiet hours while he slept, I researched my father's network. Derek Walsh sent encrypted emails to a burner phone updating me on Robert's activities. My death had barely caused a ripple in his operations. If anything, he seemed energized, taking on higher-profile cases with increasingly harsh sentences, the grieving father playing the role of righteous judge. Marcus had taken the fellowship at Johns Hopkins. Photos showed him thinner, hollow-eyed, throwing himself into 18-hour surgery days. I printed one picture and kept it in my nightstand, allowing myself 5 minutes each night to mourn what we'd lost. Then I'd put it away and return to planning. 3 months into my new life, I received an unexpected message, not from Derek, but from someone signing themselves another ghost. They wanted to meet at a coffee shop in the Pearl District. I almost didn't go, but curiosity won, and I found myself sitting across from a Latino man in his 30s with the kind of hypervigilance that came from years of looking over your shoulder. You don't know me, he said quietly, but we have something in common. Robert Whitfield destroyed my life too. His name was James Torres. 5 years ago, he'd been a financial advisor with a promising career and a young family. Then, he'd accidentally discovered that one of his clients was laundering money through Grace Whitfield's charity. He'd tried to report it thinking he was doing the right thing. Next thing I knew, I was arrested for embezzlement. Evidence appeared that I'd been stealing from clients, documents with my signature that I'd never signed, witnesses who swore they'd seen me do things I hadn't done. His hands clenched around his coffee cup. Your father presided over my trial, wouldn't allow my lawyer to present exculpatory evidence, sentenced me to 8 years. But you're out. Served 3 before the real embezzler got caught in another scheme and confessed. By then, my wife had divorced me, taken our daughter. My career was over. You can't come back from a conviction like that, even if it's overturned. He leaned forward. I've been tracking Whitfield ever since, building a network of his victims. There are dozens of East people whose lives he's destroyed for profit or convenience. Why are you telling me this? James smiled grimly, because Derek Walsh talks when he's drunk. And when he mentioned Judge Whitfield's daughter faking her death after learning the truth, I knew I'd found a powerful ally. That meeting changed everything. James introduced me to others. A teacher fired after refusing to change grades for a school board member's son, a small business owner driven to bankruptcy by targeted harassment. A young mother whose ex-husband had paid Robert to ensure she lost custody. All of them had evidence, pieces of a vast puzzle of corruption. We met monthly in the basement of a closed restaurant, sharing information and planning. I provided insider knowledge of Robert's methods and connections. They provided proof of his crimes spanning 20 years. But it wasn't enough. We had evidence of individual injustices, but nothing connecting them to the larger network until Alysa arrived. She showed up at one of our meetings 6 months after I'd died, a trembling woman in her 20s with haunted eyes. James had found her at a shelter, recognized the signs of someone running from powerful enemies. Elena's story made everything else pale in comparison. She'd been brought to the U.S. from Guatemala at 15, promised work as a nanny. Instead, she'd been forced into domestic servitude, then worse. The trafficking ring moved her between wealthy homes, including some we recognized as Robert's associates. She'd spent years invisible cleaning houses and overhearing conversations in Spanish that the speakers assumed she couldn't understand. "Oh, Judge Whitfield's wife," she whispered, clutching a cup of tea with both hands. "She runs it all. The charity brings them in as scholarship students, then they disappear into the system. Domestic workers, factory labor, worse. Those who resist or try to escape." She didn't finish, but we understood. Grace's foundation for disadvantaged youth was actually importing them for exploitation. "I have papers," Alysa continued, "lists of names, dates, locations. I stole them when I ran, but they're looking for me. They'll kill me if they find me." We relocated Alysa to a safe house in Seattle, but she insisted on staying connected to our group. Her evidence was the smoking gun we'd needed. Direct proof linking the Whitfields to human trafficking with enough detail to bring down the entire network. Meanwhile, my work as a home care nurse provided unexpected opportunities. Portland's wealthy hired private nurses for discretion, and I found myself in the homes of judges, prosecutors, and business owners. They talked freely around the help, especially someone as quiet and efficient as Sarah Coleman. One client changed everything. Margaret Thornton, recovering from hip surgery, was the mother of Police Chief Bradley Thornton. She complained constantly about her son's long hours, his secretive meetings, the way he'd changed since getting involved with that judge from Denver. I played the sympathetic nurse, bringing her tea and listening to her troubles. She revealed that Bradley was being groomed for bigger things, including a marriage that would cement certain alliances. "Oh, some girl from Denver," Margaret said, taking her pain medication. "Madison, something. Pretty enough, but cold as ice. Bradley doesn't love her, but her father promised to make him attorney general if he plays along." My sister was marrying into the corruption, solidifying the network through matrimony. The wedding would be a gathering of every criminal in their organization, a celebration of power built on destroyed lives. That night, I made a decision. Alysa Whitfield had been dead for 8 months. It was time for her resurrection. But first, I needed more than evidence. I needed allies inside the system. Catherine Reeves had gone dark after helping fake my death, too terrified to run, but still trapped in Robert's office. I reached out through encrypted channels, offering her a way out if she'd help one more time. Her response was desperate. "He knows about the missing files. Security's tighter. Can't get anything out." "I don't need you to take anything," I wrote back. "Just leave a window unlocked." While planning the break-in, I got word from Derek that made my blood freeze. Marcus hadn't forgotten about me after all. He'd been quietly investigating my death, questioning the suicide narrative. His digging had attracted attention. "Your father's got eyes on him," Derek warned during a clandestine meeting. "There's talk of a permanent solution if he doesn't drop it." The thought of Marcus in danger because of me was unbearable, but it also presented an opportunity. If Marcus was investigating, maybe he'd be receptive to the truth. I had James make contact, feeling out Marcus's intentions. The report back was encouraging. Marcus didn't believe I'd killed myself, suspected my family was involved, and was willing to risk everything to find out what really happened. "Bring him in," I decided, though it terrified me. "He deserves to know." The reunion happened in a warehouse in northeast Portland. I waited in the shadows as James led Marcus inside, watched his familiar stride, the way he rubbed his neck when anxious. When I stepped into the light, he stopped breathing. Alysa." I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, but nothing prepared me for the reality. Marcus crossed the space between us in 3 strides, pulling me against him like he was trying to merge our bodies into one. He smelled the same. Soap and hospital disinfectant and that cologne I'd bought him for Christmas. "I knew," he whispered against my hair. "I knew you weren't dead, but why, how?" The explanations took hours. Marcus's face cycled through disbelief, rage, and devastation as I laid out the truth about my family, the accident, our baby. When I finished, he was silent for so long I thought I'd lost him. "We're going to destroy them," he finally said, his healer's hands clenched into fists. "Every last one of them." "It's dangerous." "They killed our child, Alysa. They tried to kill you. Did they think I'd just accept them, move on?" He cupped my face in his hands. "I've been dying without you. At least now I have something to live for. Justice for our baby." With Marcus on board, our small resistance grew stronger. He had connections at Johns Hopkins, including a friend at the FBI who'd been looking into medical fraud that traced back to Denver. Suddenly, we weren't just collecting evidence. We were building a federal case. The wedding announcement came 6 months later. Madison Whitfield and Bradley Thornton, a spring ceremony at the Grandview Hotel. The guest list read like a who's who of corruption: judges, police officials, business leaders, and politicians. "It's perfect," James said, studying the announcement. "They'll all be in one place, guards down, celebrating their alliance." "It's also dangerous," Elena pointed out. "Security will be massive. How do we get close enough to matter?" I smiled for the first time in months. "We don't get close. I walk right in the front door. After all, what bride doesn't want her sister at her wedding?" The planning began in earnest. FBI agents would be positioned around the venue. Our evidence would be released simultaneously to major news outlets. Elena would testify via video link from protective custody, and I would confront my family with the truth wearing a wire to capture their final confessions. "What if they try to kill you right there?" Marcus worried. "They won't. Not in front of 200 witnesses. Robert's too smart for that. He'll try to control the situation, minimize damage. That's when he'll make mistakes." Catherine finally agreed to help, worn down by years of guilt and the promise of witness protection for her and Danny. She confirmed that Robert had terminal liver disease diagnosed shortly after my death, but kept secret. He was getting desperate, making moves to secure his legacy and transfer power before his body betrayed him. He's planning something big for the wedding, she warned, a final play that will set up Madison and Bradley for decades of control. I don't know what, but he's been meeting with organ brokers. Organ brokers. My father was planning to buy his way into a few more years of life, probably with organs harvested from the very people his wife trafficked. The evil was bottomless. As spring approached and the wedding drew near, I transformed back into Alysa Whitfield. Hair dyed back to its natural color, Sarah Coleman's documents destroyed the ghost, preparing to haunt her killers. The night before the wedding, I stood in front of a mirror in a Portland hotel room wearing a simple black dress. Marcus stood behind me, hands on my shoulders. "You don't have to do this," he said one last time. "The FBI has enough to move without your testimony." "Yes, I do. For our baby. For all their victims. They need to see that they didn't win. That truth survives even when they try to bury it." He kissed my temple. "Then let's go remind them that resurrection is possible." We drove through the night toward Denver, toward a reckoning 3 years in the making. In my purse was a photo of an ultrasound, the only image of our child. Tomorrow, at my sister's wedding, surrounded by those who'd tried to destroy me, I would speak for those who couldn't. Justice was coming to the Whitfield family, and I would be the one to deliver it. 2 years of living underground had taught me patience. Every document photographed, every conversation recorded, every connection mapped became a thread in the web I was weaving around my family. Now, with the wedding 2 weeks away, it was time to pull those threads tight. Marcus and I set up our base of operations in a motel outside Denver, far from the neighborhoods where we might be recognized. The room's walls became a murder board of connections. Photos, documents, and strings creating a visual representation of the corruption network. At the center were Robert and Grace's photos surrounded by their lieutenants. Madison and Bradley Thornton occupied their own section, showing their rise through the ranks. Below them, dozens of victims' faces stared back at us, demanding justice. "The trafficking alone should get them life," Marcus said, adding another document to Grace's section. "But connecting it to the judicial corruption, the money laundering?" "We need them to confess," I interrupted. "The evidence is strong, but Robert knows every legal loophole. A recording of him admitting everything would be undeniable." Our FBI contact agent Jennifer Park agreed. She'd been building her own case for 2 years, focusing on the medical fraud that had first caught her attention. Our evidence had blown her investigation wide open. "The wedding's our best shot," she said during a secure video call. "They'll be relaxed, overconfident, but we need more than just you walking in. We need someone on the inside who can document everything." That someone turned out to be Catherine Reeves, who'd finally found her courage. She arrived at our motel one night, looking like she'd aged a decade in the past year. "I can't do it anymore," she said, collapsing into a chair. "Watching him destroy people, knowing I helped. Danny's safe. I sent him to my sister in California. Now I want to help nail Robert to the wall." Catherine brought more than just willingness. She had access codes, schedules, and most importantly, knowledge of Robert's final plan. "He's arranged for a liver transplant," she explained. "Off the books, of course. The donor is a young man from one of Grace's trafficking operations. Perfect match, no questions asked. The surgery's scheduled for the day after the wedding." My stomach turned. He's literally stealing someone's life to extend his own. That's not the worst part. The young man doesn't know he's a donor. They're planning to stage another accident, harvest the organs while he's supposedly in surgery for injuries. Catherine's hand shook. "His name is Carlos. He's 19 from El Salvador. Grace has been grooming him for this for months." Another life on the line, another family to be destroyed, but also an opportunity. "Where is Carlos now?" Marcus asked. "Working at one of their safe houses. He thinks he's lucky got a good job chance at citizenship." Catherine laughed bitterly. "He even sent money home to his mother last week. No idea it's his last payment. We added Carlos to our protection list. Agent Park arranged for him to be quietly extracted 2 days before the wedding, replaced with an undercover agent who spoke fluent Spanish. Robert would show up for his illegal surgery to find FBI agents waiting. Meanwhile, I focused on the wedding itself. The guest list Catherine provided was a goldmine of criminal contacts. We cross-referenced names with our victim database, finding connections everywhere. The prosecutor who'd helped convict James Torres, the social worker who'd placed Alysa, the medical examiner who'd falsified autopsy reports. It's not just a wedding, I realized. It's a summit meeting. They're consolidating power for the next generation. Bradley Thornton was the key to that consolidation. As police chief, he controlled local law enforcement. As Robert's chosen successor, he'd have access to the judicial network. Married to Madison, he'd have legitimacy and connections. But Bradley had a weakness. His mother Margaret, who I'd cared for months earlier, she'd mentioned his guilt over things he'd done, his late-night drinking, the way he sometimes cried in his childhood room when he thought no one could hear. He's not like the others, I told the team. He's corrupt but conflicted. Maybe we can flip him. Agent Park was skeptical. He's engaged to your sister. His career depends on this alliance. But does he love her? Or is he trapped like everyone else in Robert's web? We decided to test it. Derek Walsh, still playing double agent, arranged a meeting between Bradley and one of his victims, a young officer he'd forced out of the department for refusing to plant evidence. The conversation was recorded, and Bradley's reaction was telling. He didn't deny the accusations. Instead, he broke down, admitting he'd become something he hated. I wanted to be a good cop, Nindom, he said on the recording, but Whitfield had evidence of my father's corruption. Either I played ball or Dad went to prison. One compromise led to another, and now he was about to marry my sister and become the next generation of corruption. Unless we could offer him another way out. 3 days before the wedding, everything accelerated. Alysa agreed to leave protective custody to testify in person, believing her presence would have more impact than video testimony. James Torres gathered 30 other victims, willing to stand outside the venue in silent protest. Marcus coordinated with medical colleagues to document the organ trafficking network. And I prepared for my performance of a lifetime. The wedding day dawned clear and bright, Colorado sunshine making the mountains gleam. I sat in an FBI surveillance van 2 blocks from the Grandview Hotel, adjusting the tiny microphone hidden in my necklace. Agent Park checked the equipment one more time. Remember, we need clear admissions of guilt. Don't let emotion override the mission. Marcus squeezed my hand. You've got this. Our baby would be proud. Catherine had gone in early part of the wedding preparation team. She'd already planted cameras in the bridal suite and Robert's designated office. Bradley Thornton was also wired, having agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence and witness protection. His last communication says, Madison's nervous, Agent Park reported. Apparently she had nightmares all week about someone crashing the wedding. Sisterly intuition, I said. She always knew I'd come back. The van's monitors showed guests arriving, a parade of expensive cars and entitled criminals. Robert looked gaunt in his tuxedo, the liver disease obvious to anyone who knew the signs. Grace floated beside him in champagne silk, every inch the society matron. They greeted guests like royalty receiving subjects. Carlos is secure, another agent reported. The extraction went smoothly. He's pretty shaken up learning the truth. Another life saved. Another family that wouldn't be destroyed. It helped balance the weight of what I was about to do. At precisely 2 o'clock, the ceremony began. We watched on the monitors as Madison walked down the aisle, beautiful in a dress that cost more than most people's cars. She looked perfect, cold, untouchable. Bradley waited at the altar, his face a mask of resignation. Father Timothy, who'd baptized both Madison and me, performed the ceremony. I wondered if he knew he was blessing a union built on blood and suffering. Or maybe he was part of it too. Trust no one, Derek had taught me. In Robert's world, everyone was either predator or prey. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The kiss was performative, lacking any real passion. The applause, thunderous. The happy couple walked back down the aisle to begin their reception, their reign of terror, their inherited empire. It was time. I left the van and walked toward the hotel's service entrance. Catherine met me there, her face pale but determined. They're all in the ballroom. Robert's about to give his toast. Perfect timing. She handed me a server's uniform. Blend in until you're ready. I'll be recording everything from the bridal suite monitors. I changed quickly, tucking my hair under a catering cap. Just another invisible servant in their world of privilege. The irony wasn't lost on me. The ballroom was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers, mountains of white roses, ice sculptures that would melt before anyone noticed their beauty. Round tables filled with people who'd built fortunes on others' misery. And at the head table, my family holding court. Robert stood, champagne glass raised. The room quieted for the father of the bride. Friends, colleagues, family. He began, his voice still commanding despite his illness. Today, we celebrate not just a marriage, but a merger. A joining of families dedicated to maintaining order in an increasingly chaotic world. I moved between tables invisible in my uniform, getting closer to the stage. Some people talk about justice as an ideal, Robert continued, but we know better. Justice is what we make it. Laws are tools to be wielded by those strong enough to shape society. Today, Madison and Bradley join the ranks of those shapers. The crowd applauded. I reached the side of the stage, hidden behind a flower arrangement. My daughter has learned well the lessons of power. She understands that sometimes difficult choices must be made, that the weak must be cooled so the strong can prosper. That family comes first, always. He raised his glass higher. So here's to Madison and Bradley. May they rule wisely and well. May their enemies fall before them. And may they never forget that power, true power, comes from the willingness to do what others cannot. The room began to rise for the toast, and I stepped out from behind the flowers, pulling off my catering cap. Does that include killing your own grandchild, Dad? My voice carried across the suddenly silent ballroom. Champagne glasses froze midway to lips. 200 faces turned to stare at the ghost who'd just walked into their celebration. Robert's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the stage. The sound echoed in the silence like a gunshot. Hello, Dad, I said, walking toward the head table with measured steps. Surprised to see me? You should be. After all, you're the one who tried to make sure I'd never walk through any door again. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Guests scrambled backward, some heading for exits, others frozen in shock. Cameras flashed as society reporters realized they'd stumbled onto the story of the decade. Security guards rushed forward but stopped when Bradley Thornton raised his hand. "Let her speak," he said, his voice carrying the authority of his position. Madison grabbed his arm, hissing something, but he shook her off. Robert recovered, first his judicial composure reasserting itself. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. My daughter has clearly been under tremendous stress." Stress. I laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "Is that what you call attempted murder these days?" "Alysa, you're confused," Grace said, rising from her chair with a practiced grace. "The accident, losing the baby. It's affected your mind. Let us help you." "The way you helped Carlos." I pulled out my phone, projecting his image onto the ballroom screen. 19 years old, scheduled to die tomorrow so you could steal his liver. "Is that your idea of help, Mom?" Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several guests tried to leave but found FBI agents blocking the exits. The trap was closing. "This is ridiculous," Robert snarled, his mask slipping. "Security, remove this woman." "I wouldn't do that," Agent Park announced, entering with a team of federal agents. Alysa Whitfield is a protected witness in an ongoing federal investigation. Anyone who touches her will be charged with obstruction of justice. Madison stood slowly, her wedding dress, suddenly looking like armor. You're making a terrible mistake, Alysa. Whatever you think you know. I know you drugged me the night before Dad had my brakes cut, I said, staring directly at her. I know you suggested the sedatives to make the accident look like driver error. I know you helped plan the murder of your own niece or nephew. Prove it, she said coldly. I smiled. Nishan, gladly. Touching my necklace, I activated the projection system Catherine had set up. The ballroom screen lit up with surveillance footage from 3 years ago. Madison in Robert's office discussing the Alysa problem. Her recorded voice filled the room, Ambien in her dinner wine. She always has a glass when she visits. It'll be in her system by morning, make her reflexes slower. If the brake failure doesn't kill her, the delayed reaction will. Robert's response chilled the blood. And if she survives, then we try again, or make her wish she hadn't. The recording continued, showing them discussing the disposal of my body, if needed the cover stories they'd prepare, how they'd handle Marcus. Their casual, evil planning my death like a business meeting shattered any remaining illusions the wedding guests had about the Whitfield family. That's fabricated, Grace stammered, but her perfectly composed facade was cracking. Is this fabricated too? Elena emerged from behind the FBI agents, no longer the terrified victim, but a survivor, demanding justice. Mrs. Whitfield, you remember me. You brought me here when I was 15, promised me education opportunity. Instead, you sold me into slavery. More victims entered. James Torres, the teacher, the business owner, dozens of people whose lives Robert had destroyed. They formed a line along the ballroom wall, silent witnesses to decades of corruption. This is entrapment, Robert roared, his face purple with rage. I'll have every one of you. What destroyed? Like you destroyed us? James stepped forward. You sent me to prison for a crime I didn't commit. Took 3 years of my life, my family, my future, all because I stumbled onto your wife's money laundering. Money laundering is the least of it, I said, gesturing to the screen again. New documents appeared, shipping manifests, financial records, photographs of young people who disappeared into Grace's charity system. 57 victims that we can document, Agent Park announced, brought here on student visas, then vanished. Some into forced labor, others into worse situations, all processed through the Whitfield Foundation. You're twisting everything, Grace protested, but her voice had lost its authority. The foundation helps thousands of young people. A few administrative errors don't make us criminals. Administrative errors, Elena's voice rose. I was raped, beaten, forced to work 20-hour days. Others weren't as lucky as me. Maria died in childbirth at 16, no medical care because she didn't officially exist. Thomas was worked to death in a factory, his body dumped like garbage. Administrative errors. The room had become a tribunal, crimes laid bare before an audience of co-conspirators who suddenly realized they were all going down together. Several tried to slip out but were quietly detained by federal agents. Madison, ever the strategist, attempted damage control. Bradley had nothing to do with this. He's as shocked as everyone else. But Bradley, wearing his wire and knowing his only hope was full cooperation, stepped away from his bride. That's not true. I knew, participated, helped cover up crimes because Robert blackmailed me. He looked at the assembled crowd. Just like he blackmailed half the people in this room. The dominoes began falling faster. Guests turned on each other, some trying to claim ignorance, others pointing fingers. A judge admitted to fixing trials. A prosecutor confessed to withholding exculpatory evidence. The entire corrupt network began cannibalizing itself in the face of federal prosecution. Robert, seeing his empire crumble, made one last desperate play. He reached into his jacket, and for a terrifying moment I thought he had a gun. Instead, he pulled out a phone. One call, he said, his voice deadly quiet. One call and Alysa dies. I still have people everywhere. Prison guards, inmates, officers on the street. You'll never be safe. Like I was safe when you cut my brake lines. I stepped closer, no longer afraid of the man who terrorized me. When you killed my baby, when you tried to erase me from existence. You forced my hand, he exploded. You were going to pollute our bloodline, destroy everything I'd built. That mongrel child would have been our downfall. The confession hung in the air, captured by dozens of recording devices. Robert realized his mistake too late, his face contorting with fury and fear. It's over, Dad, I said quietly. Your reign of terror ends today. But Robert Whitfield hadn't survived decades of corruption by giving up easily. In a move that shocked everyone, he grabbed a nearby flower girl, the daughter of one of the catering staff who'd wandered into the wrong place at the wrong time. The child, maybe 6 years old, screamed as Robert pulled her against him, using her as a human shield. Everyone stays where they are, he commanded, backing toward the exit. I'm leaving and nobody follows. The FBI agents froze, unwilling to risk the child's life. The little girl's mother sobbed, held back by security, and I realized this was how Robert had always won, by finding the most vulnerable person in any situation and exploiting them. But he'd taught me well. Find the weakness, apply pressure, win at any cost. You're dying, I said conversationally. Liver failure, final stage. How long did the doctors give you? 6 months less. His grip on the child tightened. Shut up! That's why you needed Carlos. Young, healthy liver to buy you more time. But Carlos is safe now, protected by people you can't reach. I took another step closer. You're going to die, Dad. In prison alone, knowing you failed. I said, shut up. Or what, you'll kill another innocent, add child murder to your crimes. I gestured to the crowd. Half these people are recording. You harm that girl, and even your corrupt friends can't save you. The little girl whimpered, tears streaming down her face. I caught her eye and winked, hoping she'd understand I was trying to help. You know what the ironic part is? I continued, circling slowly. I'm a match. Your blood type, tissue compatibility. I had myself tested after learning about your illness. I could save your life. Robert's eyes widened. Hope, desperate and pathetic, flickered across his face. You're lying. Am I? You always said I was too much like you for my own good. Turns out that includes our biology. I pulled medical documents from my pocket, holding them up. Perfect match. Better than Carlos, actually. Your own daughter's liver could give you another 20 years. He loosened his grip on the child, slightly fixated on the papers. You'd do that, after everything? I let him see the possibility, the future where he lived. Then I smiled. No, but I wanted you to know that I could, that your salvation is standing right in front of you, and you'll never have it. Just like my baby will never have life because of you. The rage that transformed his face was terrible to behold, but in his fury he forgot about the child. She slipped free, running to her mother, and suddenly Robert stood alone, exposed with dozens of guns trained on him. On your knees, Agent Park commanded, hands behind your head. For a moment, I thought he'd go down fighting. His hand twitched toward his jacket again, but then his shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him as his illness and defeat finally registered. The handcuffs clicking around his wrists sounded like justice. Grace tried to maintain dignity as she was arrested, but tears ruined her perfect makeup. Madison fought, screaming obscenities, having to be physically restrained. The entire head table was led away in custody, along with 24 wedding guests. Bradley Thornton removed his own boutonniere and handed it to an agent. I'm ready to cooperate fully. I have documents, recordings, everything you need. As the ballroom emptied of criminals and filled with crime scene technicians, I found myself standing where I'd started, among the shattered remnants of celebration. White roses trampled underfoot, wedding cake, abandoned ice sculptures melting into puddles that reflected the chaos. Marcus appeared beside me, pulling me into his arms. You did it. We did it, I corrected, leaning into his strength. All of us. Every victim who stood up, every witness who testified. Elena approached no longer the terrified girl I'd first met, but a warrior who'd faced her demons. Thank you, she said simply, for believing me, for fighting when it seemed hopeless. We fought for each other, I told her. That's what they never understood. They thought isolation made us weak. Instead, it made us family. Agent Park interrupted our moment. We'll need comprehensive statements from everyone. This is going to be the biggest corruption case in Colorado history, maybe national history. You'll have them, I promised, every detail, every crime, every life they destroyed. As we prepared to leave the devastated wedding venue, I took one last look at the head table. The chairs that had held my family now stood empty. Their reign ended not by violence, but by truth. Ma'am. A small voice made me turn. The flower girl Robert had grabbed stood there with her mother clutching a single white rose. You saved me! I knelt to her level, accepting the flower. You were very brave. What's your name? Hope, she said. Of course it was. In the wreckage of my family's evil empire, a child named Hope handed me a rose. The universe had a sense of poetry. Thank you, Hope, I said. Keep being brave, okay? As we walked out of the hotel, past the protesters and media and ambulances treating those who'd collapsed from shock, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 3 years. Peace. The war was over. Justice was coming. And somewhere in whatever afterlife awaited a baby who never got to take their first breath could rest, knowing their death had not been in vain. The Whitfield dynasty had fallen. From its ashes, truth had risen. The trials lasted 18 months. I spent countless hours in courtrooms testifying against the people who'd raised me, loved me, and ultimately tried to destroy me. Each day brought new revelations as the full scope of the corruption network unraveled. Robert's trial was the centerpiece: attempted murder conspiracy, racketeering, human trafficking, judicial corruption. The charges filled 20 pages. He sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, his illness advancing rapidly, without the illegal transplant he'd counted on. The man who'd once commanded courtrooms with his presence now looked small, hollow, dying. During my testimony, he tried to stare me down with those cold gray eyes. But I wasn't his little girl anymore, wasn't someone he could intimidate into silence. I spoke clearly about the brake failure, the sedatives, the camera in my hospital room. I played the recording of Derek Walsh describing Robert's instructions. I showed the jury photos of my crashed car, my medical records, the ultrasound of the baby who never got to live. He didn't just try to kill me, I told the court. He succeeded in killing his grandchild, an innocent baby whose only crime was having the wrong father in Robert Whitfield's eyes. The prosecutor asked if I had anything to say to my father. I looked at him directly. You taught me that power comes from the willingness to do what others cannot. You were wrong. Real power comes from the courage to stand up to people like you, no matter the cost. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Life in prison without possibility of parole. Robert showed no emotion as the verdict was read, but I saw his hands tremble. The liver disease would kill him long before his sentence ended. He'd die in a prison medical ward alone, except for guards who despised him for being a corrupt judge. Grace's trial revealed even darker depths. The trafficking network she'd run through the foundation had destroyed hundreds of lives over 2 decades. Survivors testified about forced labor, sexual exploitation, and worse. Elena's testimony was particularly devastating, delivered with quiet dignity that left several jurors in tears. The foundation's financial records, decoded by forensic accountants, showed money flowing to criminal organizations worldwide. Grace had been more than a facilitator. She'd been a mastermind, using charity galas and suburban respectability to hide modern slavery. She got 40 years, effectively a life sentence, for a woman in her 60s. As they led her away, she looked at me with something like bewilderment, as if she couldn't understand how her carefully constructed world had collapsed. In her mind, she'd probably always be the philanthropist, the good woman brought down by ungrateful children. Madison's trial was the hardest for me. Despite everything, part of me remembered the little sister who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd begged me to braid her hair for school pictures. But that girl had been gone long before she helped plan my murder. The evidence against her was overwhelming. The recorded conversations, the financial transactions, the testimony from Bradley Thornton about their partnership in crime. She'd known about every aspect of the family business, had actively participated in covering up murders and protecting trafficking operations. "I did what I had to do," she said during her allocution. "In our family, you were either predator or prey. I chose to survive." "You chose wrong," I whispered from the gallery. 15 years with possibility of parole in 10 if she cooperated fully. She was 25 my age when they'd tried to kill me. She'd emerged from prison at 35 or 40, her youth spent behind bars, her dreams of power and prestige reduced to a number on a jumpsuit. Bradley Thornton's cooperation earned him a reduced sentence of 5 years. He testified against everyone, providing crucial evidence about police corruption and cover-ups. His mother, Margaret, attended every day of his trial, weeping for the good boy she'd lost to bad influences. I felt sorry for her. Another parent failing to protect their child from the darkness of the world. The trials of the network's other members filled courtrooms across Colorado. Corrupt judges, prosecutors, police officers, business leaders. Decades of carefully cultivated criminality exposed to the harsh light of justice. Some fled the country, others negotiated plea deals, a few fought to the bitter end. But they all fell eventually, the house of cards Robert had built collapsing completely. Throughout it all, Marcus was my anchor. He'd taken a position at Denver Children's Hospital, coming home each night to hold me while I processed another day of testimony. We found a small house in Washington Park, far from the neighborhoods where I'd grown up, and slowly began building the life we'd dreamed of before everything went wrong. "Do you regret it?" he asked one night after a particularly brutal day of testimony. "Coming back, you could have stayed hidden, stayed safe." I thought about it curled against his chest in our bed. They stole 3 years of my life, killed our baby, destroyed so many families. How could I stay hidden knowing they were still out there hurting people? He kissed my forehead. "That's why I love you. Even after everything, you chose justice over safety." "I chose us," I corrected, "a future where we don't have to look over our shoulders, where other families don't suffer like we did." The money recovered from the criminal network was staggering. Over $200 million hidden in offshore accounts, property, and laundered assets. After legal fees and restitution to victims, a significant amount remained. I worked with Elena and James Torres to establish the Phoenix Foundation, a real charity doing what Grace's had pretended to do, helping trafficking victims rebuild their lives. Elena became the foundation's first director, her experience and compassion making her perfect for the role. "From ashes we rise," she said at our first board meeting. "That's what Phoenix means, right? We burn away the old life and create something new." The foundation provided legal aid counseling, job training, and safe housing for survivors. Within 6 months, we'd helped 50 people escape situations similar to what Elena had endured. Each success story felt like a small victory against the darkness my family had spread. Carlos, the young man whose liver my father had planned to steal, became one of our first success stories. With the foundation's help, he got legitimate work papers, enrolled in community college, and brought his mother from El Salvador legally. He sent me a photo from his graduation wearing his cap and gown, alive and free, because we'd acted in time. A year after the trials ended, I received an unexpected visitor. Catherine Reeves, looking healthier than I'd ever seen her, arrived at the foundation with her son Danny. He was thriving in college, studying social work, inspired by what his mother had done to help bring down the Whitfields. "I wanted to thank you," Catherine said, tears in her eyes, "for giving me the courage to do what was right, for helping us escape that life." "You saved yourself," I told her, "and you saved me. That unlocked window, the information you provided. None of this would have happened without you." She smiled, the expression transforming her face. "I sleep through the night now. No more nightmares about the things I helped hide. That's worth everything." As the second anniversary of the wedding confrontation approached, I found myself back at the Grand View Hotel. Not for a celebration, but for a memorial. We'd rented the same ballroom, transforming it into a space of remembrance for all the victims of the Whitfield network. Where crystal chandeliers had sparkled now, simple white candles flickered, one for each person we'd identified who died because of my family's crimes. Photos lined the walls: Maria, who died in childbirth at 16. Thomas, worked to death in a factory. Dozens of others whose names we were still learning. Marcus and I lit a special candle for our baby, placing it at the center of the memorial. Around us gathered survivors, families of victims, and the law enforcement agents who'd risked everything to bring justice. "We're here to remember," I said, speaking to the assembled crowd, "to honor those who didn't survive to see justice done, and to promise that their deaths were not in vain." Elena spoke about Maria, her friend who'd tried to escape with her. James Torres remembered fellow inmates who'd been wrongfully convicted. One by one, people shared stories of loss and survival, grief and hope. Agent Park, now head of a federal task force targeting human trafficking, announced that the Whitfield case had led to 30 similar investigations nationwide. "The network was bigger than we imagined," she said, "but so is our determination to stop it." As the memorial concluded, I stood where Robert had given his toast about power and control. In the same spot where he'd proclaimed that the weak must be cold, I spoke different words. True strength isn't about controlling others or bending the law to your will. It's about standing up for those who can't stand for themselves. It's about choosing justice even when injustice would be easier. It's about building each other up instead of tearing each other down. I looked at the faces around me: Elena James, Catherine, Agent Park, and so many others who'd refused to be victims. We are phoenix risen from ashes. We are proof that truth survives even the darkest lies. We are the legacy they never wanted, but the one they created through their cruelty. The applause was different from the wedding 3 years ago. Not the polite clapping of conspirators, but the genuine appreciation of survivors, recognizing their own strength reflected in each other. 2 weeks later, I received a letter forwarded through the prison system. Madison's handwriting, once perfect like everything else about her, now showed signs of wear. "Alysa, I know you have no reason to read this, less reason to believe me, but I need you to know that prison has given me time to think, to remember the sister who taught me to ride a bike and held my hand on the first day of school. I was wrong about everything, about what power means, what family means, what matters in life. I see now that I traded my soul for promises of control that turned to dust the moment truth appeared. I'm in therapy, trying to understand how I became someone who could plan her sister's murder. The simple answer is that I was weak. I saw Dad's power and wanted it no matter the cost. The complicated answer involves years of grooming normalization of evil and choices I can never take back. I don't ask for forgiveness. Some things are unforgivable, but I wanted you to know that I think about that baby every day. My niece or nephew who never got to exist because I helped steal their chance at life. I'm working with the prison counselor on ways to honor their memory, maybe help other women here who've lost children. I'm glad you survived. Glad you fought back. Glad you showed the world what we really were. You were always the strongest of us, the one who chose healing over harming. I wish I'd been more like you. Madison. I read the letter 3 times before showing it to Marcus. He held me while I cried. Not for the sister I'd lost, but for the one I'd never really had. Do you want to visit her? He asked. I thought about it for a long time. Maybe someday, when I can look at her without seeing that recording of her planning my death, when forgiveness feels possible instead of like another betrayal. There's no rush, he said. Healing happens on its own timeline. 6 months later, that healing took an unexpected turn. I was reviewing grant applications at the foundation when nausea hit me hard. The same feeling I'd had 3 years ago before my world exploded. This time, I let myself hope. The pregnancy test was positive. Marcus and I sat on our bathroom floor staring at the little plus sign like it might disappear if we looked away. It's real, he whispered. It's real. We cried, then all the grief and joy and fear mixing together. This baby couldn't replace the one we'd lost, but they could represent our phoenix rising, new life from the ashes of destruction. The pregnancy was monitored carefully, both for medical reasons and security concerns. Even with Robert dying in prison and the network dismantled, we took no chances. But this time, no threats came. No accidents were staged. No one tried to steal this child's chance at life. 8 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby girl. We named her Hope after the flower girl at the wedding, who'd shown me that, even in the darkest moments, innocence could survive. Marcus cried when he held her for the first time. She's perfect. She's ours, I said, touching her tiny fingers, and she's free. Free from the legacy of the Whitfields, free from the expectations of corruption and control, free to choose her own path in a world where her grandfather couldn't hurt her. Robert died 2 weeks after Hope was born, his liver finally failing in the prison medical ward. I didn't attend the funeral. There wasn't one. He was cremated and buried in the prison cemetery. No mourners, no marker beyond a number. The man who'd craved power and legacy left nothing behind but a cautionary tale. Grace outlived him by 6 months, dying of a stroke in her cell. Madison was denied permission to attend either funeral part of her punishment for the crimes she'd committed. She sent another letter after Hope was born, congratulating us and promising to be a better person if she ever got the chance to meet her niece. Maybe when Hope's older, I told Marcus, when she can understand why her aunt was in prison, when Madison's proven she's truly changed. The Phoenix Foundation grew beyond our wildest dreams. Corporate donations poured in from companies wanting to distance themselves from the Whitfield scandal. We opened shelters in 5 cities, helped hundreds of trafficking victims find freedom, and partnered with law enforcement to prevent future exploitation. Elena got married to a fellow survivor she met through the foundation's support groups. James Torres went to law school, becoming a defense attorney for the wrongly accused. Catherine Reeves became a victims' rights advocate. All of us transformed our pain into purpose. 3 years after the wedding, on Hope's 2nd birthday, we held a celebration at the foundation. Not a lavish affair like the Whitfield gatherings, but a simple party with cake and balloons and people who'd become family through shared survival. Hope toddled between the guests, giggling and playing, blissfully unaware of the history that had brought us all together. She'd grow up knowing her mother had been brave, that standing up to evil was possible, that families could be chosen as well as born. "Mama, up," she demanded, raising her arms to me. I lifted her, feeling her solid weight, her reality. This child who existed because I'd refused to let them win, because Marcus had never given up on me, because dozens of people had risked everything for justice. "You know what hope means?" Elena asked, touching the toddler's cheek gently. "Tell me." "In Spanish we say esperanza. It means expectation of something good. Belief that tomorrow can be better than today," she smiled. "That little girl is all our tomorrows, isn't she?" I looked around the room at the survivors and advocates, the reformed and the righteous, the broken who'd become beautiful, my real family forged in fire and stronger for it. Yes, I said, hugging Hope closer. She's our proof that they didn't win. That love is stronger than hate, truth more powerful than lies, and hope more enduring than evil. As if understanding, Hope clapped her hands and laughed, the sound pure and untainted by the darkness that had come before. In her joy, I heard the echo of another child's laughter, the one who'd never been born, but whose loss had sparked the fight for justice. Thank you, I whispered to that lost baby. Your life mattered. Your death changed everything. And now your sister will grow up in a world where the monsters have been slain. The party continued around us, a celebration not just of a birthday, but of survival justice and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Outside Denver stretched beneath the mountains, a city cleaner for the corruption we'd exposed. The Whitfield name, once synonymous with power, was now a reminder that no one was above the law. But in that room, with my chosen family and my daughter in my arms, the past felt properly buried. We were no longer victims or survivors, but victors writing a new story with every life saved and every day lived in freedom. The Whitfield dynasty had ended in a wedding destroyed by truth. The Phoenix Foundation's legacy was just beginning, built on the radical idea that power should protect the vulnerable, not prey on them. And Hope laughed in my arms, unaware that she was named for exactly what she represented: the chance to begin again, to build something beautiful from the ashes of what had been burned away. That's the thing about phoenixes. They don't just survive the fire. They rise from it, transformed, magnificent and free. What would you have done if you discovered your own family was behind such evil? Could you have found the courage to stand up to them, knowing the cost? Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and consider subscribing for more powerful narratives about justice, survival, and the strength of the human spirit. Share this with someone who needs to hear that standing up to evil is possible, no matter how powerful it seems. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, you are stronger than those who would harm you, braver than you know, and worthy of a life free from fear. Until next time, keep rising from whatever ashes life throws your way. You have the power to write your own ending, and it can be beautiful.